In this week's video, I'll be going over my first impressions of the Sony A7RV. I've had this camera now for a couple of months, and I've been using it quite a bit, from street photography in LA, to travel photography in Hawaii, to even a friend's graduation. I've had a great time with this camera so far, and the positives far outweigh the very minor annoyances in my opinion. So before I start chatting too much, I'll get right into it. Starting with the positive of the A7RV, the main feature that interested me was having a camera that was very versatile in terms of megapixels. The ability to crop in and still have enough resolution is such a nice option to have in my opinion. It's definitely not a need, as you don't need this to get great photos, but it is something that I love to have just in case. Let me give you a scenario of how I like to use the additional megapixels of this camera when shooting in real time. When I was in Hawaii, I went on a Jungle Jeep expedition tour. I didn't really know what to expect, but I did know that I probably wouldn't have any chances or opportunities to change my lens on the actual tour. So that's why I went in with my Sony A7RV and my 24-70 GM2. And I was especially right, as it was so bumpy and even rained on us quite a bit. The 24-70 already gave me a lot of versatility as expected because it's a zoom lens and also the focal length 24-70. But having that extra megapixel count let me expand that range to around 105mm when going into APS-C crop mode. And of course I'd be able to zoom in even more if I needed to in post, all without sacrificing too much resolution of the picture. And that really helped me get some shots during the tour that were still too far, even when zoomed all the way to 70mm. Now some may ask, why not just get the 70-200 if that were the case? And that is true. I could have just rented a 70-200 for the trip, but that would mean that I would have to bring an extra lens for the trip, and during that tour, I wouldn't have any access to the 24-70 portion of the focal length, which I ended up using a lot as well. The ability to get more range just by cropping is such a great tool to have in my opinion. I love having that option in my back pocket just in case without having to really carry anything extra, which is very important to me. The ability to keep everything as lightweight as possible. It's like having two lenses in one, especially when using a prime lens. There are quite a few instances where this happened before getting this camera, and due to that, those photos ended up being pretty low resolution, just because I cropped in quite a bit, which is definitely a big part of the reason why I decided to upgrade to the Sony A7RV. Related to the megapixels, the Sony A7RV also gives you the option of picking smaller raw files. I don't always need to have the 61 megapixel photos, especially if I know I'm not going to crop in, or if I'm just out taking photos on the street. This lets me still get great resolution for my photos, as the medium-sized raw files still give me 26 megapixel photos, while at the same time gives me the ability to also have more space in my computer and external SSDs for more photos and videos. It's really an effortless switch if I ever feel like I need to crop in as well. If I'm shooting with lossless medium, but I see a composition where I'll potentially need to crop in, because I have the raw file menu as a shortcut, I can access it from the main menu, quickly change to uncompressed, and then push my button that I have set for APS-C. And then from there, I'm ready to snap the photo. It's a simple system that again allows me options for when I'm out shooting without adding any sort of additional weight whatsoever. Another big feature of this camera is the amazing versatility of the LCD screen. With the Sony A7 IV, Sony finally brought the flip screen to their other cameras besides the A7S III. It wasn't needed, but it definitely is appreciated, especially when it comes to the video aspect of using the camera. But with the flip screen, while it does give you positives, there are certain things you are sacrificing as opposed to using the tilt screen, which I mentioned a bit in my A7 III versus A7 IV video. But in the A7RV, you don't have to worry about sacrificing anything at all, because with the A7RV and its fully articulating screen, you can actually tilt and flip your LCD screen, giving you both the positives of having a tilt and flip screen. Not only that, but it brings other possibilities where you'd be able to view your LCD screen in all sorts of ways. I probably won't be using it like this, but having both a tilt and flip screen is a huge W in my opinion. No longer are the days where I have to feel like I'm sacrificing anything when looking at the type of LCD screen a camera has, when there is a camera that has both. And I hope Sony continues to implement this in their newer models. I won't be buying them at all, as I feel like the A7 IV and the A7V are way more than enough for me, but it'll be a better experience for the people who are looking to upgrade to whatever those cameras may be. Moving on, the next thing that caught everyone's attention, or at least sparked their interest, is the autofocus capabilities of the A7RV. Sony has been known for a while now for how well the autofocusing has been in their cameras, and the Sony A7RV is no different. What is different, or surprising I guess for me, is the number of different ways and options you have for autofocusing. For example, in the A7R4, you have the options of picking between human autofocus, animal autofocus, and bird autofocus. And I feel like that was already at the pinnacle of options for autofocusing. But the A7RV just trumps that with the amount of options they give you. Not only do they give you the option of human, bird, and animal autofocus, they also give you insect autofocus, car and train autofocus, and airplane autofocus. Now, I've never used them before, but it's a nice thing to have whenever I do end up getting some photos of cars. Even after going through all that, that still wasn't the main reason why I brought the autofocusing. The main reason is because this camera is so unbelievably good at focusing on a subject's eye, even when it's not visible. This can probably be described better by other people here on YouTube, but basically, even when the eye isn't showing, this camera can still track and guess where the eye is, giving you the ability to focus on the subject. It's definitely not a feature that made me buy the camera, but it's a nice help for whenever it does lock on a subject when I'm walking around on the streets. The last feature that isn't really anything new, especially if you own any of the newer Sony cameras like the A7 IV, is the video capabilities of this camera. I appreciate that you can record in 4K 10-bit 422, basically keeping a lot of the same video capabilities and features that the A7 IV has. That way I have two cameras, the A7 IV and the A7RV, that are pretty similar in terms of video capabilities, that I don't have to worry about bringing any of them in particular for when I do video work. Whatever camera I have when I'm out shooting, I can use that same camera to do video work and have the same workflow when editing. The only difference that is somewhat annoying on the A7RV compared to the A7 IV is that you cannot do APS-C crop mode when shooting 4K 60, whereas for the A7 IV, you can only do APS-C crop mode on 4K 60. That small difference is annoying to have, but it's not a deal breaker or anything like that. Whichever camera I have on a particular day is good enough for the type of work I need to do. It also helps the layout matches the A7 IV as well. The only thing that is different is that for the A7RV, you have to press this button right here to change from manual to aperture priority or to your personal settings and whatnot. But again, it's not too big of a deal. So this is one negative that I forgot to mention in the actual video, but for the A7RV, there's this kind of weird bug that the LCD screen has when you view pictures on the LCD screen. And that is you see these really small pixels. It's just a very weird annoyance that I haven't seen on any other camera. The A7 III didn't have it, the A7 IV didn't have it. Yeah, with the A7RV, it's not just me because I went on Google and I typed this up seeing if anyone else had the same problem. A lot of people share the same thought that they had these little pixels on their LCD screen. Again, it's not a big deal. It's not really any deal, honestly. Sometimes you kind of just forget about it, but when you do view your pictures on the back of the LCD screen, you do kind of come back and say, oh, what the hell is that? And then, you know, there's these little pixels. And I hope Sony can address this, but I don't have any hope, and I don't think they will. So it is something to think about, and it is something that you have to deal with if you do end up buying this camera. I was aware of the talks that people were having who were also interested in the A7RV, which was A7RV or Sony A1. And that definitely passed through my head, but ultimately I decided to pick up the A7RV, obviously since I'm making this video. But some may ask why. Well, you can find one of the answers just by looking at the difference in the price alone. You can basically buy the A7RV in the 70-200 GM version 2 and come around close to the same price as the A1 alone. And while that is a big part of the reason why I chose the A7RV in the end, the features that are lacking in the A7RV compared to the A1 just wasn't worth the money for me in my opinion. At least not right now. I don't need 4K 120 for video, even though that'd be super nice to have. I don't need the 30 FPS burst shooting. I actually don't shoot burst 99% of the time anyways. Combine those with the fact that Sony has yet to really update the A1 with a lot of the features that it lacks compared to the newer models of the A7 IV, as a lot of people are talking about, it was a pretty easy choice to go with the A7RV. Like I mentioned before, the big reason why I wanted a camera with more megapixels was to have options to crop and basically have multiple focal lengths at my disposal, even if I only have one lens or so during a shoot, whether that be a zoom or prime, letting me be as minimalistic as possible when traveling and moving around. At the end of the day, for the way I like to use it, the A7RV has been a great camera for me. It's definitely not something I absolutely need for my kit. These cameras are tools for me to use to take photos. For photography, my A7 III worked perfectly, and I could have easily kept it and still produced the photos I wanted. But for my workflow and the options the A7RV gives me when traveling around, it makes life much easier for me, so it was worth upgrading. Anyways, that's all from me this week. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the like button down below and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch y'all next week. Later.